You've ever felt exhausted but looked at your calendar and thought, nothing here seems that overwhelming? This episode's for you. At 16 years old, I thought my problem was that I wasn't smart enough. I had the resume, I had the hustle, I was valedictorian, but I couldn't raise my SAT reading score no matter how hard I tried. But here's the thing, what I didn't understand back then was this. I wasn't incapable. I was just exhausted. And that same blind spot followed me into adulthood. In this episode, I'm breaking down why burnout isn't a time management problem, but it's an energy allocation problem, and how managing your energy, not your minutes, is the real key to sustainable performance. If you're tired of trying to optimize your calendar while you're running on empty, let's talk. Hey y'all, I'm your host, Courtney Cecil, and welcome back to another episode of the Life Management System for Working Moms. This episode channels 16-year-old Courtney because it's only taken me a couple decades to appreciate my blind spot. The only thing standing between me and the college of my dreams was a good SAT reading score. So I had a killer resume and was very fine and comfortable there. Like I did all the things. I played six varsity sports. I competed in piano. I lettered in marching band. I was a trumpet player. Fun fact. I made it to international science fair after winning state multiple times. I represented my school at Girl State. I was graduating valedictorian. Like it was a check, 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 check. But guess what? All of those things had in common. I could hustle harder to call them a success. Like I would gladly stay up till 3 a.m. any day of the week if it meant I got to claim another win. And herein lies the problem. And it's kind of followed me into adulthood. Because what I didn't understand at 16 wasn't that I was failing because I lacked intelligence. Yeah, I'm a pretty smart person. No, I was just absolutely exhausted. I would often stay up past midnight almost every day, grinding and grinding and grinding. But one place I couldn't grind was my SATs. You either have it or you don't, right? At the time, I was convinced I didn't have it because my scores continue to fall short of my goals. Now, thankfully, the good news is it didn't hold me back. I did graduate from a top 10 industrial and systems engineering program. I'm very proud of that. It's a very much a core part of my identity. But, I just kind of happened into it. My resume got me there, but it certainly had nothing to do with my reading SAT scores. So I was recently asked to speak to a public accounting firm on how to survive busy season without burning out. I spent 16 years in that industry, and while I'm not a CPA myself, I actually started out as a traditional management consultant, and then I became a management consultant for my own firm. So essentially, I was studying audit and tax professionals. And as you can well gather, audit and tax professionals have very traditional, very strict busy season. So I was brought in to speak on, how do our teammates survive that? And during the conversation with that firm, by the way, as well as many other people and conversations I've had before that, there are two very clear misconceptions. The first is in stable working seasons, flexibility is freedom and a gift. However, in an intense season, guardrails actually reduce friction. And I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but think about it. Everyone working whenever they want to sounds great until you're chasing an inflexible schedule and deadline, and the only shared free time you got is at 9:30 p.m. Nobody wants to be meeting at 9:30 p.m. The other misconception is that being skilled at time management is actually the key to burnout. But guess what? It's not. And don't get me wrong, time management is a very valuable skill. I'm a big believer in it, but it's far from the most valuable skill as it relates to how you get more out of your day. Instead, though, what's more important is managing your energy. Because burnout is not a scheduling problem, it's an energy allocation problem. Time management helps you organize tasks. It certainly helps bring together the pieces. But energy management is what's determining whether or not you can actually execute what is on your plate. So think about your own energy. Bring to mind a time when you're just firing in all directions. You feel like you can tackle the world. You feel good about yourself. You feel like there's nothing that you can't accomplish. You feel like your battery is full. But then think about when you're at your worst. Your gas tank's probably running on empty, And it's those times where you find yourself continuing to reread the same paragraph 5 times in a row, and you're still not sure what you read or what you should do as your next step, where you should be spending your time. You're just kind of spinning and spiraling. All of that is essentially wasted time. All of that spinning, that's just you wasting your time. And no time management ninja can outsmart depleted energy. So let's go back to my SAT challenge to bring this home. It took me years, decades to realize that my problem was never that I was incapable at getting a good score on my SATs. Instead, it was just that I was always too depleted to fully engage with the material I was looking at. So I would often like practically, when I think back to that time, I felt like I was practically falling asleep at my desk. I would certainly reread the same paragraph over and over and over. And so by the time I got to the end of it, not know what the heck the topic was even about. And that problem totally followed me into adulthood. And part of that, is the nature of the beast. I remember I was in a very severe postpartum spiral. I was really vortex. Vortex is probably the most appropriate way to describe it because on top of postpartum, I was also suffering from severe burnout. And both of those, like, coming together and coming to a head at the same time caused me to get incredibly poor sleep to the tune of probably 3 to 4 hours a night. So, with the help of some sleep strategies, including a sleep hygiene and nervous system tool called the Apollo Neuro, which I swear by. I'm going to drop a coupon code in the show notes for you. I went through a lot of work to get here, but I eventually improved the quality and the quantity of my sleep, which coincided with improving how I manage my energy. And now, because my sleep is actually finally stabilized, my decision making is stabilized, my patience is stabilized, my performance is stabilized. And that changed everything for me. My productivity, my effectiveness, my relationships, like all for the better. But here's a little bit of confession. Y'all, recently I have been in the thick of a ton of work. Like the past couple of months have really done me in a very humbling way. It is far harder to carry the pressure of building a business on your own when you don't have a stable paycheck. It was actually easier for me to be living that corporate Fortune 50 life and building the business on the side. And that sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, but it's true. So I've been in the absolute thick of a ton of work and I've relapsed. Not in the same way that I did when I was 16, where it was just exhaustion fueled all the time. That's certainly part of it, but it's all the other thick stuff that comes with being an adult. So I actually had a friend have a very confrontational, is the word I like to use, conversation with me about it a couple days ago. I'm actually recording this real time. This episode releases in 2 days. So she had this very confrontational conversation with me about how I was showing up. So it has been a very heavy topic on my mind. And then fast forward 2 days later, I'm recording this on a Sunday. I'm talking about 2 days ago, it was a Friday. And I was commuting home from downtown and I could hardly keep my eyes open. My boys were in the car and, so it wasn't just me that I was at risk driving. Here I am, hardly able to keep my eyes open. That's scary enough for me, let alone anybody else on the road, let alone driving my kids around. And I realized then that I had not been managing my energy at all. In fact, I was gambling with it. That is it's just shown up in so many ways that I was blind to. I mean, it was too close to it, right? It's easier for me to see my challenges when something big happens. It's easy for me to see some of my clients' challenges immediately, but when you're that close to it, it's really hard for you to see for yourself. And it took me stumbling pretty significantly to realize that I was not showing up as my best self, and I had my energy to blame. It's just been an incredibly full 3 months. And that drive with my boys in the back was the point where I realized how extremely unbalanced life had been, regarding my obligations completely outpacing my capacity to manage them. And it probably would have been fine had I not thrown my back out in December. If you listen religiously, you'll know that I spent most of December horizontal, which meant that my 4 weeks of of time, like GSD time, to be able to get ahead for my busy season in January was completely taken away from me. And that's a full month, like nursing that back for that full month, I would never get back. And that just left me with this very condensed, compressed time period that I had to squeeze a lot into. And I've paid the price for it. And I had that wake up call hit me in the face for me to realize, wow, I really need to recalibrate because this is not sustainable. I just need to do something different. And I am truly, generally very steadfast about practicing what I preach here. Like really, I do that from a place of authenticity. It's very important to me. But I also realized that despite being very good about committing to some of those more foundational needs of mine, for example, being able to honor my relationships and really lean into those and really prioritize those. Like if you look at my calendar, you'll see that it fully reflects what it is I value. So I've been doing that without fail. But as it relates to managing my energy, which is also something I know I need to do, I've been a classic case of the cobbler's kids not having any shoes. My boss at my last organization used to say that all the time. I led culture there, but I sat in the performance management function, and she always used to say, we can't be the cobbler's kids without any shoes. And I think about her often, but most particularly in this circumstance, because I allowed myself to leak, and some of the well-designed boundaries that I've always had in place to protect myself just started to erode. Like I was staying up past my bedtime to answer just a couple more emails. The emails could have waited and they just didn't. Or I would stack all these back-to-back meetings to fit stuff in because I took so much time off in December that I was trying to play catch up. But while that felt more efficient at the time, I really needed those buffer times between the meetings to be able to like fully debrief and transition to what's next instead of pushing that off to later at night. And I also continue to lie to myself and be like, oh, I'll rest next week. That old meme that's been going around, like being an adult is saying, and next week will get better over and over again until you die. Like that has essentially been my life. That's clearly not the case unless you do something about it. And I know myself well enough to know that my tendency is to just keep pushing for more and more and more. So I put these boundaries in place essentially to protect myself. I know I can't trust myself. So I put boundaries in place to protect what it is I value. So that way I can still have freedom to do what it is I want to do, but and like meet those goals, but most importantly, protect what it is that matters most. So, despite being a professionally trained time management ninja, I am like a Six Sigma black belt. It's kind of what we study. Industrial and systems engineering, it's what we study. It's how do you make things more efficient and more effective. I wanted to tell you something in very plain language. Time management means nothing without proper energy management. Because here's the thing about most time management recommendations, they're like hacks. Hacks are going to save you time, but just like a fad diet after New Year's, it's February, who's still on that fad diet? It's not going to stick, and it's not going to fix your stress or shave off material time in the long run. But you know what does? Systems, aka a life management system, and energy management. Because time is a fixed asset, but energy is something you can actually like produce more of, which is a great thing. Energy isn't just a byproduct of rest, though, which is, certainly that's part of it, but it's not all. Energy is also a result of strategic allocation. So, what comes to mind for me when I think about a life management system is the word intentional. In fact, it is the number one word I would associate with anything that I teach. It's not the word value. Now, values are very foundational, important, but what and why values matter is because it allows you to intentionally curate your life around them. So the word intentional is very important to, and the most important principle that I teach. The word intentional is essentially generally the ability to key in to doing what you're doing with absolute design. And that's the way you're going to get more out of life. So let's frame that word in the context of Pareto's principle. So, Pareto's principle, for any of you that are not familiar, you might perhaps you're used to hearing it called the 80-20 rule. It essentially implies that roughly 80% of our outcomes come from 20% of our energy, or 20% of our effort. Or said differently, if you intentionally put your energy into the right 20% of the tasks, you are going to get 80% of your results. So, as an example, 20% of the people you engage with are probably consuming 80% of your emotional energy. 20% of your habits are determining whether you feel depleted or steady. 20% of your activities are driving 80% of your results. So you're kind of getting up, picking up what I'm putting down there. Yet, most professionals spend their time reacting to the other 80%. So think about things like emails and interruptions from cell phones, social media, your colleagues, teams pings, that sort of thing, or any of the low leverage requests that are coming in that don't actually help you get what you're being measured by, or the unspoken expectations that you're carrying that you believe others have of you that are not necessarily aligned with what you value or what you need to be spending your time and energy on. So you're not ever going to be able to add more energy into life, regardless if you're in a quote unquote busy season or not. And many of us are in a busy season, whether that be like the true traditional busy season of your career, or it just being the fact that we're raising kids and we are in the middle management part of our career and we are just grinding it out and hustling all the time. You're not going to be able to add more hours into life, but you can decide where your best energy goes. So, surviving this season of life, it's not about squeezing anything more out of you. Um, Relieve your pressure to carry that. Instead, surviving is about asking yourself this question: where does my energy actually create value? And where am I spending it out of habit, guilt, or fear? I'm going to ask that again so that way you can sit on it. Where does my energy actually create value? And where am I spending it out of habit, guilt, or fear? Because burnout isn't a scheduling problem, it's an energy allocation problem. So those people who are effective at aligning their 20% of their energy with the place that will make the biggest impact do things like protect their peak energy. And what I mean by that is I'm an evening person. When everybody is calm, that's when I may be able to do my best thinking. But for most people, it's more a warning. So protect your peak energy. Make sure you are spending your core hours when you're at your best on the things that matter the most. Another thing, stop over investing in low return tasks. If it's not something that's like kicking on all cylinders for you and really getting you results, dial down that volume. Another thing that people who are very effective do, they decide what actually deserves A plus energy and they let go of all the rest. So if you've been here for a while, you've probably heard me refer to B minus effort. So what I mean by that when I say that is at this season of life we're in, you probably don't need an A plus on everything. You need to decide like what is actually worth that A plus, and everything else good enough is good enough because we just don't have the capacity we did. If you think about raising kids, there are about 5 hours a day, like 5 hours a day that go into raising kids. When you think about getting them up in the morning, down at night, getting all the stuff done, even after they're not physically with you, 5 hours is a lot of life to give. So the only way that you can do the things you want to do is to lower your standards a little bit. And the last thing that really effective people do that manage their energy is they set very clear expectations so their energy isn't wasted on constant vigilance. It's a really important one, too. So that's what gold standard looks like. But in addition to that, be aware of these traps because these three things are some of our biggest energy drains. The first is decision fatigue. And that's often why I talk about being clear on what you value. Because when you're clear on what you value, all of a sudden it helps you lock in very strategically and knowing what you need to say yes and no to. So it helps with some of that decision fatigue. The second trap is around being constantly available. That might be, the accessibility that people have through things like your phone or Teams, but it also might be your willingness to always say yes, to be the person that is always reliable and therefore the yes person that people come to because you're always available and because you're always there to serve others as opposed to serving yourself. And the last major like energy drain trap is having unclear expectations. If you're not clear, call a timeout and ask. My boys use that as an excuse all the time. They're like, but I didn't know. I'm like, yeah, but did you ask? If your expectations aren't clear, you're probably going to be spinning. You're probably going to have to redo things later. And you're probably going to be doing things that aren't fully aligned with the outcomes you're chasing. So, again, those three major energy traps are one, decision fatigue, two, constant availability, and three, unclear expectations. So if those are your drains, then you probably need systems to protect against those. And putting systems in place is exactly what I do for my clients, just in case you're curious. And I know that, working with a professional is not always accessible to people. It is why I spend so much time putting out free content like my podcast. But what I will say is working with professionals like me do get you quicker results. So if you are feeling in the thick of it now and you are just desperate for time, the quickest path out of there is engaging in a professional. But if you don't feel like that's accessible, if you don't feel like that's something you can prioritize for yourself right now, then here's your cheat code. Just make sure that when you think about managing your energy, you think about doing so along these three levers. The first one is physical, because if your body is running on fumes, your brain's going to follow. So think about things like sleep and movement, even outside time. That's physical. That's getting to your core system, your core nervous system, and being able to help you regulate. The next is cognitive. That's the deep work. That's being able to get into a place where you're really hitting your groove and your stride versus constant context switching. Because context switching is one of the fastest ways to torch that high value energy. And the third bucket is emotional. So think about things like boundaries and expectations that probably aren't even yours. They're probably something that you're superimposing from others, whether they be implicit or explicit. And then resentment. I mean, that's kind of a gnarly one to acknowledge, but resentment's pretty expensive and it's going to drain yourself far faster than any task itself. So if you're actually trying to manage your time better and you feel like you're constantly running on empty, you're probably solving for the wrong problem. Again, taking us back to where we started, it's not about time, it's about energy. So I've designed a 3-minute boundaries self-check quiz to help you audit where you're leaking your energy. And it's going to give you the clarity you need to know exactly what's wearing you down. So I was given the gift of having someone call the timeout for me. And there's a lot to unpack beneath that. But I know more than anything, the most foundational takeaway is I did a crap job continuing to keep my boundaries intact. And it allowed to me eroding my own energy, which ended up, creating some spiraling effect for me. And part of that I had the gift of reflecting on because I was already in the zone of doing that. So this past week, I got home from hosting a retreat, but I also hosted my biannual boundaries mastermind with my clients, which is one of my favorite things that I do because it's so fun to be able to see them play off each other and gain insights from the experience and the wisdom of other people. I really believe in the wisdom of the team, and I got to experience that at both the retreat and my clients' boundaries mastermind. But I ended both of those things asking the attendees to identify one small improvement they can make to get closer to their goal. And for me, I did that same reflecting, and my shift was simple. I just need to turn my lights off at 11:30 and just commit to it. It's really that simple. My alarm doesn't go off till 7, and I know that sounds really late, but my boys are in a late school, a late bell school. But lately, even though, I do sleep a little later than most moms, I'm not turning off my lights until anywhere between 12:15 and 1. Um, and actually, there have been a lot of 1:30 nights. And I know the trick to doing that is getting ready for the bed while the boys are getting ready for bed. So that way, when 11 o'clock hits, I'm not going downstairs at that point to start getting ready for bed. Like I'm already there and I just have to gradually get in bed, let myself decompress for 15 minutes and actually be able to turn off the lights. It's nothing revolutionary, it's nothing big, and it generally isn't. But instead, it's about dogmatically actually honoring that as a need of mine instead of constantly letting all of these other things backfill my time instead of protecting what I know I need to protect. So changing my process of how I'm getting ready, as opposed to it happening after I finish work at 11, and instead getting ready with my boys, that's going to help me protect that boundary for myself and therefore help me get the results I want to keep my energy high and therefore my performance and the way I show up for other people in my life even higher. So, what is it for you? No afternoon caffeine so you get more quality sleep? Doing your core work in the morning and saving your inbox for the end of your workday? Getting fresh air every single day? Maybe it's just stopping a low return task and lowering your standards so you're not wasting your energy on something that doesn't yield ripe fruit. I've got a whole episode on how to improve your sleep in a postpartum world, and I'm going to link that in the show notes. I've also got an entire episode around setting boundaries, as well as my boundary self-check quiz, so you can know exactly where you're leaking that energy. I'm going to link both of those in the show notes. But as always, I'm grateful for every time you tune in and listen. It's not lost on me what a gift it is that you're choosing to spend part of your valuable energy here with me. And I hope you consider it an investment in yourself to help you be at your best. Your time is fixed, but your energy is not. My friend, protect it accordingly. So thanks again for being here. Until next time, if nobody's told you lately, you're doing a great job. You've got this, mama. If today's conversation hit, especially the parts about sleep depletion, running on fumes, then you need to listen to episode 11, How to Fix Your Own Sleep Struggles After Kids. Because here's the truth, you could not out strategize chronic exhaustion. In episode 11, that's right, a throwback, I walk through practical, realistic ways to improve your sleep in a postpartum or busy working mom season without pretending you can just go to bed earlier and magically fix it. If your physical energy is unsustainable, everything else wobbles. So go queue up episode 11 next. Your time is fixed, but your energy is not. Let's protect it.